Drew, when you're ready.
Katie, I think as we announced recording is in progress, you also said, "Hey, Drew, take it from here." Am I correct?
That is what I said.
All
Thank
right,
you.
good, good. Well, I will take it from here then. Thanks, Katie. And good day, colleagues, or good evening, colleagues, depending on where you're joining us from. It is wonderful to be with you or have you with us. My name is Drew Koch. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the not-for-profit John M. Gardner Institute for Excellence in Higher Education, short version Gardner Institute. Really pleased to have you with us to talk about and reimagine what's possible for graduate students. I do want to share a little bit of context about the organization for some. We're an old friend, an established friend, an evolving friend. For others, we are new, at least new to you. We're not so new to the higher ed scene. We have been functioning. We will be celebrating our 26th birthday and starting our 27th year in this upcoming month in October. We, as I mentioned, are a 501c3 with a mission to help colleges and universities, higher ed organizations, philanthropies, and individual educators improve teaching, learning, student success, and completion for all students at all levels so that we can help students thrive, earn degrees or credentials of high value, and go on to live meaningful and productive lives, right? So that's the mission. That's a bit about the organization. What I want to emphasize for at least 30 seconds is the higher education aspect in our organization named. Until about a year ago, the Institute solely had undergraduate education in there. But as higher education has evolved, so has the Institute's focus. As our one of our two co-founders, our namesake for the organization, and I discussed once, the Institute is moving both quote unquote north and south. We've seen a large scale growth, higher ed opportunities in dual enrollment, early college, where the post-secondary experience is actually starting before a student steps foot on a campus, whether that's in person or virtually. And what we've also seen is a melding, if you will, of the graduate student experience with the undergraduate experience, with the development of 3+2, 4+1 programs. And it just made a ton of sense based on where institutions are going, how students are experiencing higher education, for us to begin to apply some of our expertise in ways that they already were needed to be applied based on what higher ed institutions are doing right now. So in the event that you're wondering, what is the Gardner Institute, what does it do, or what is it doing in a space or place like this? Quick recap, going to be 26-year-olds, worked with over 700 plus colleges and universities, predominantly on the undergraduate experience, but now lending some of that experience because of the fusion between undergrad and grad to the graduate student experience as well. So I am pleased to share that context with you all. What I'd like to do very quickly is introduce to you what the concept is of the graduate student experience for purposes of our work, and then turn it over to our co-founder and executive chair, Professor Gardner, for him to share a bit more and introduce our panelists for today. But before I do that, last contextual piece really is on what the heck do these folks mean by the graduate student experience. And what I can tell you, I know all of you are probably avid readers and can read what is in front of you, but we are really using a rather holistic, all-encompassing definition for the graduate student experience. We've been fortunate to have considerable engagement with discipline associations during our 25, now 26 years. A prime example would be work with the American Historical Association that's done wonderful work around career diversity, particularly focused on what transpires in the program, where we're drawing on, but also expanding the definition here is both what happens within the program and in experiences connected there too, making the case that co-curricular or perhaps out of program, but still highly relevant experiences need to be more intentionally harmonized with what's going on in the academic experience and in the broader preparation of the graduate student. Again, a rather holistic approach. We really do want to focus on fostering and achieving better outcomes for students who start. If 1 in 6 or 1 in 8 actually come away with a terminal degree, if you will, those outcomes are not only bad to begin with, they certainly are no longer publicly acceptable. So it's beginning to focus on how can we help more students thrive in earning a graduate degree. A little bit of this expansion, although saying perhaps more than a little bit, is also to understand a little more differently than what is the graduate student experience. In many instances, as we talk with colleagues, there's a natural default to go to full-time PhD or doctoral level degrees. And what we're calling for is a yes and approach to that. Yes, that absolutely matters. And so to professional doctorates, so to professional masters, master's programs, et cetera. So as graduate education is expanded, we think the understanding and definition for what the graduate student experience needs to be expanded as well. So with that as background context, I would like to, as I said, I would twice, third time's a charm, turn it over to John now to do some introductions and add a few words. John, take it from here, please.
Sure. Thank you, Drew. And good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to state my concern for what we're talking about this afternoon as succinctly as possible. And that is that our country has approximately 4 million graduate students currently enrolled. And that is more than all of the new students, first-time students in American higher education. And yet for 40 years, as a country's higher ed system, we've been pursuing a focus on what we call student success. And the population that we've been overwhelmingly concerned with are those first-time students in undergraduate school and not the far larger number of graduate students. So what we're asking you to consider is to incorporate in whatever locus of control and sphere of influence you have on your campus to consider incorporating 4 million graduate students into this discussion about student success. Now, we can't, of course, do this ourselves. Everything our organization has done has been done with other colleagues, many of them smarter and more capable than we have. So I want to introduce an example of our partners. And I'm going to start with, I've got a list in front of me. I'm just going to read down it. Len, I'm looking at you. Let me start with Len Cassuto. An introduction, please.
Well, hi, everybody, and thank you for taking this time to have this conversation. I teach at Fordham University, and I have been writing about graduate education for the Chronicle of Higher Education. I've been a regular columnist for about 15 years, and I've written a couple of books on the subject.
Thank you, Len. And Len is going to be a part of a book that we all are producing that will be published next year by Johns Hopkins University Press. Let me go next to Laura Rendón. She is here. I know she is. I can see her lips moving, and she's going to unmute. Tell you what, I'm going to let her get that fixed and come back to her in just a minute. Let me try instead April Perry. April?
Yes, thanks, John. Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here today on a Friday afternoon. I'm April Perry, professor of higher education at Western Carolina University. I am originally a student affairs professional turned faculty member, and I am excited that I get to support and teach graduate students who are preparing to go into this industry of higher education. I'm a part of this conversation today because I joined this academic conversation by co-editing a book a couple of years ago, along with my colleague. I see her on the call, Practitioner's Guide to Supporting Graduate and Professional Students. So I've been a scholar and researcher in this space for a handful of years now, and I'm excited to share what I've learned with you all today.
And she lives and works just over the Blue Ridge Mountains here in Western North Carolina, where the Gardner Institute's based, and she's in Waynesville and Cullowhee, North Carolina. Let me move now to Dan Volchik. In geographic terms, he's up in the Northeast at the oldest university in the United States. Dan?
Thank you, John. I'm Dan Valchak. I'm Assistant Dean of Student Success at the Harvard Griffin Graduate School of Arts and Sciences. I have been working both in student and academic affairs for over 20 years at various graduate schools. I've also been deeply involved with NASPA, which is the Professional Association for Student Affairs staff, and primarily with the administrators and graduate and professional student services knowledge community, which has advocated for grad students in the profession for 20 some odd years. And we were lucky enough to have John as our general session speaker at our pre-conference last year. And it's been really great to partner with the Gardner Institute on this whole initiative. Most of my experience has been at R1 institutions with a heavy undergraduate presence. And so I've been seeing very carefully how the undergraduates, rightfully so, are getting most of the attention on those campuses. But I've also seen how graduate students have many of the same needs and issues that the undergrads have, and that the work that the Gardner Institute has done with first-year students is very applicable to graduate students. So it's really great to be part of this conversation.
Thank you. And that most of the attention, as you described it, is in large part due to the partnership between faculty like myself, academic administrators, and student affairs professionals. And so we believe that getting a national conversation started about this graduate student experience is going to take those three constituencies again coming together to focus on a critical population of college and university students in this country that we think in some respects are neglected. So thank you, Dan, on behalf of your profession. Let me go back now and try and get Laura Rendón. Laura, is your voice?
I am now back, I believe.
There you are.
I'm sorry, I had a glitch. It wouldn't allow me to unmute, but I finally got unmuted. So anyways, Laura Rendón, I'm Professor Emerita at the University of Texas at San Antonio. For over 25 years, I've taught in higher education programs, and dealt with educating master's and doctoral students, chaired quite a number of dissertations. So I'm familiar with graduate education from that standpoint. A lot of my research has focused also on undergraduate education, particularly getting more low-income and first-generation students into and through college. And develop some theories in terms of teaching and learning and validating students that I believe are well known now throughout the nation. So it's a pleasure to join everybody here and to contribute my knowledge to this new movement that you, John, are spearheading. And congratulations on that.
Folks, we would want to, I guess it's a form of confession that Laura and I met when we were both very young faculty, and we've been pursuing similar life causes since then. We were both on the faculty at the University of South Carolina. And unlike me, Laura could get another job, and she moved on elsewhere. I spent my entire teaching career concluding on the graduate faculty at the original USC. So it's great to have her here with us.
Thank you. And I forgot to mention that I am a proud member of the board of directors of the Gardner Institute.
She's reminding me that one of my bosses is here overlooking my shoulders this afternoon. I'll just forget that for a minute. Finally, I want to introduce our newest colleague. And ladies and gentlemen, we're going to do a conference in Chicago in about a month, October 29 to 31, on the graduate student experience. And we're already planning for a national conference to follow that, that will be held on the campus of Georgia Tech University in Atlanta in March of 2027. And here representing the leadership team of that Georgia Tech planning process is Jay Codrington-Poyotte. And I'd like her to introduce herself. And Jay, why are you here anyway? She's shaking her head.
It wasn't allowing me to unmute myself for a minute there. So thank you for allowing me to do so. It's a pleasure to join this important conversation on the future of graduate education. My role at Georgia Tech in strategic planning as a director of business operations and strategic initiatives allows me to work on topics such as student support, institutional innovation, and it's making this topic not only relevant to my work, but essential to it. Graduate education is undergoing a profound transformation, as we can all see, and it needs to be at the top of all of our minds. It's evolving rapidly. So from well-being and belonging to mentorship and career pathways, we must rethink how we support our graduate students in holistic and meaningful ways. So I appreciate you giving us the opportunity to have this conversation and kind of get the topic going about the future of graduate education.
Well, you're exhibit A of what a world-class university can do to pay more attention to the total success of students. And if you can do it, what's the excuse for the rest of us not doing it? So thank you very much. We mentioned in our introduction that we were going to say a little bit about why we'd come together around this topic, but I want to get us, or actually ask Drew to get us right into some questions and responses. So Drew, would you take it away from here, please?
I will gladly, John. And colleagues, we're going to devote about 20-25 minutes to a few structured questions around this with the panel. And then we really want to hear from you, and we'll open it up to you. So stay tuned for that. If the spirit moves you and you want to put some questions in the chat already, rest assured we'll get to it with my colleague Katie Locke's help. I want to start, and really I'm going to do this as an invitation to do two things. Our 6 panelists actually all shared already what their relationship to the topic is, right? What brings them here. So I'm not going to ask that question again, but I would invite them in the event that they wanted to go in a little more depth for them to share that as I ask them this question, which is, what is it that you think about the graduate student experience needs our attention right here, right now, right? What is it that needs attention in the graduate student experience? And again, if you wanted to sprinkle in, this is a bit more my background that helps me make credible assertions about that. It's your floor. You go ahead. So, who would like to start from the panel?
Look at all these volunteers rushing.
Dr. Cassuto, the floor is yours.
Sure. Thanks, Drew. I'm reminded of trying to take stock of graduate education during COVID. That during COVID, obviously, we remember this, the workplace was upended, and we had to figure out new ways to do things in a great big hurry. But as a journalist covering graduate education, I found at the time that I very quickly ran out of special things to say about COVID, because COVID effectively highlighted all of the needs that graduate education already had, rather than creating very many new ones. Now, the norms and values of graduate education have never received enough attention from higher ed professionals, both within and outside the curriculum. Right now, our house is on fire in ways that I hope I don't need to rehearse for the people who are listening right now. It's difficult to talk about what it should look like on the inside when there are torches that are being applied to it from the outside. But I think that we need to do that, our norms and our values continue to need a lot of attention. And in particular, I'm going to focus this issue because it carries over from the introductory remarks that you and John both made, Drew. The idea of student care is, I think, even more critical now than it was a year ago. And it was more critical a year ago than it was before COVID. And it's always been more important than most higher ed leaders have been willing to accord it. So student care is curricular, obviously. We need to get graduate students through the program that they choose in as good style as is possible for them. But student care also is co-curricular and extracurricular, and there's a unity of purpose that I believe that graduate schools ought to acknowledge and draw on. And there has been, I think, precious little attention to that unity and holistic perspective, and that might be something that we can talk about here. That's all I'm going to say for now.
Thanks, Lynn. Appreciate it. April, I saw you nodding north-south, and I also know you're co-author of a book on this topic. So I'm going to use that as a sign that you might have something to add or that you want to say, no, I don't. But either way, Dr. Perry, it is your prerogative to either answer or have me move to somebody else.
Yeah, thanks, Lynn. I agree with everything that you've said. It's this is so important because we know that students need support outside of the classroom. And so I'm coming from my student affairs lens here. We know that they need holistic development. What we also know is that master's students and students with intersectional identities are on the rise. And we also know that that's the group that we have the least amount of research on. And so why is this topic so important? Why do we need to be having this conversation? It's because we need to generate more research. We need to know what's going on. We all know anecdotally, if you work with graduate and professional students at all, you know, wow, we need more information. We need more support. We need more research. Plug to the case studies in this book, lots of great material here. But we know that we need so much more research about students with intersectional identities, minority identities, master's students. Those are the students that are on the rise, and we've got to be able to support them holistically. And I also believe that if you're here, if you're on this call, some part of you believes that you're part of the ecosystem. And I'm real big on that. Who is a part of the ecosystem? Who sees themselves as part of it? Who needs to be a part of it? Who doesn't see themselves as part of it? Who needs to be a part of these conversations that's not here? What colleagues need to listen to this webinar that aren't having this conversation? What kind of buy-in do we need to have? So to answer your really broad question, Drew, why is this so important? It's if we want to make an institutionalized cultural movement, we've got to get people a part of the ecosystem. We've got to get people buy-in, and we definitely need more research on this topic.
Folks, you'd be interested to know that Dr. Perry received her terminal degree graduate education in the nation of New Zealand. And that's another story that includes an earthquake. Drew, back to you.
Nice, John. And thanks, Dr. Perry. Appreciate it.
May I add to that? I
Please.
tried to get
Go ahead,
in there
Laura.
and I was muted and I couldn't unmute myself. So
Yeah.
finally I got unmuted. But I think an important issue is the underrepresentation of underserved students in graduate education. John, you mentioned 4 million students, about 60% or more are white. African Americans only about 14%, Latinos only about 12%. Alaska Native and Pacific Islander students, less than 1%. Much of that underrepresentation continues to be in STEM fields of study. At the same time, we need to address the challenges that these students are facing. For example, isolation is one of them, the lack of sense of belonging, imposter syndrome, feeling like, you know, maybe they're not good enough in graduate education, financial issues, and being presumed incompetent just because of how they look. And then we need to consider the whole idea that there are very few faculty of color that can serve as mentors for these students. And these faculty face challenges as well. It's not just the students. Some of those challenges are, you know, heavy workloads, having to do community work that largely goes unrewarded, lack of personal support systems to help them navigate the politics and the expectations of the institution. So this is a multi-layered kind of issue that we're dealing with here.
Thank you, Laura.
Drew, can I just jump in real quick?
Dan, go ahead.
So just to bounce off a little bit about what both Len and Laura said. Laura mentioned mentorship, and that's always been a hallmark of graduate education, especially at the PhD level. But as the complexity of graduate students have changed, as Laura has mentioned, it's really hard to leave all the mentorship to faculty, which has been the traditional model, which is why we need in student affairs and in academic affairs to bring more support and help to both the faculty and the students to provide those resources and those support services so it doesn't fall on individual faculty members in a lab who happen to have 5 students that are all very different and all have different needs. And we expect them to be able to support them wholly. That really can't be the expectation anymore.
So the panelists have done a great job of expressing, why they think there's a need and the time is right to have a more holistic approach and a more co-owned, co-designed approach on the graduate student experience. I'm going to shift just a bit, since y'all did a good job of identifying the why, and really focus on what can be done, and particularly, from your vantage point. And I know this is going to be hard to limit it to just one, but if you could pick one thing that you would change in the graduate student experience, what would that be? And I want to make sure we give equal time to all our panelists. So Jaydale, if you want to start with that, that's cool. If you want to, deflect to another, that's cool too, right? But would you be okay picking up on that?
Yes, I'm happy to start. I think a greater emphasis on career pathways for students should be a focus. The goal of education has always been to learn, but you also want to do something with that learning once you've graduated from school, and just more time and allowance for PhD students to do different types of career pathways, whether it be externships or just different things that give them opportunities. There are a lot of career centers that offer a lot of services to students, but they're too afraid to take time away from their labs and their programs to take advantage of these services. So we want graduate students to be prepared once they leave here to have a job and to get a job and have those hard and soft skills, even take some other types of programs while they're here, maybe get a certificate in this or project management or something else to use to combine with the skills they're learning in their focus areas. But a lot of graduate students are afraid to speak up and leave their lab. They just want to keep their head down, get their work done, and stay on target, and possibly not upset anybody or anything that could affect that. So I just think more time for them to develop holistically as a student would be appreciated.
Drew, I'm glad you started with Jay, because she didn't say this, but I want everybody to know the issues that were outlined by the opening comments are all combined and integrated into a course that Georgia Tech has designed for new master's and doctoral students, where in some ways they're using a model that's identical to what we've been using for over a century in this country to introduce undergraduate students to better cope with higher education. And maybe before we finish, we can elaborate.
Yeah, now, John, since you picked up on that, that's really Jay's or part of Jay's point, right? So that's her point. Surely you have what's a one change, and it can't be what she's doing, right? It has to be something else. So what's one more thing that you would say it's an important change or an improvement with the graduate student experience broadly now?
Okay, I rarely say anything that's particularly simplistic, but I want to say in response to your question, the one thing we could do that we're not doing is getting representatives from undergraduate and graduate education together and talking about how we might intersect and use our collective abilities, concerns, resources, and, as Len said, our capacity for caring to talk about how we can come together. Just to talk about the graduate student experience is the first thing we have to do, and that's what we haven't been doing. Back to you, Drew.
Yeah, thanks, John. So Dan, April, Laura, Len, an additive here?
I think
I'll jump in.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Go
Go
ahead,
ahead,
First,
Dan.
but we'll go to Laura next. Okay, so Dan, Laura.
Okay.
Fine.
Yeah, John and I have talked about this, and I just want to point this out. I agree with everything that's been said, by the way, but I think we need to focus on the humanity of graduate education, treating students with dignity, helping them to succeed, fostering a rightful sense of belonging, and addressing the challenges that these students have. I work with many students that are coming from communities where they want to get into graduate education, but they don't know exactly how to do it. And once they get in there, they're lost. And this is where mentoring comes in. But I also believe that from our standpoint, and I'll focus on this in my keynote at the conference, we really need to also address these students holistically, but also from a standpoint of building relationships with them letting them know that we believe in them, letting them know that what they have is as important as what others bring, etc. This is, I guess, falls under this umbrella of the humanity of working with students.
Drew, I want to comment on something Laura referred to, and she mentioned a talk she's going to be giving at this conference I referenced in Chicago. Ladies and gentlemen, three of the people you have with us this afternoon are going to be doing plenary formal talk messages. That's April and Laura and Lynn. And Dan is going to be moderating an evening free-for-all without libations to bring together faculty, academic, and student affairs colleagues to see what we can do to talk together. Drew, yours.
Yeah, thanks, John. Dan, you were going to go.
Yeah, tying a little bit with John and what everybody has said so far is one of the sayings that we have in our AGAPS group in NASPA is WAGS, which is what about graduate students? And I would expand that into what about graduate and professional students? But really what it means is as you're working on a campus, no matter what you're doing, some meeting, university level, school level, whatever it might be, and they're talking about something, you say, but what about those grad students? How are we providing the same service, similar service, equal service to those students so that they're getting the same resources that everybody else is getting? And I would expand that to even, how are we doing that for online graduate students or part-time graduate students? Because we only really look at those full-time PhD students and the master's students a little bit, but we really need to look at all of them. So it's really constantly saying WAGs is an important thing. I know April loves it. She's smiling.
April, any edits there? It's okay if you don't.
Yep, sorry. The muting and unmuting is tricky on this call. The what is really what Dan and John were talking about earlier is this isn't one person's job on a university's campus, right? It can't be on the backs of faculty only. It can't be on the backs of the graduate school only. It can't be on the backs of student affairs professionals only, right? It's this idea of like we're all a part of this collective ecosystem that is supporting graduate and professional students. And that when we're all in it together and we're answering WAGs at every meeting, we collectively start to buy in to this idea of we are not here to just support undergraduate students. We are here to support undergraduate, graduate, and professional students. And then I think it goes a step further because my guess is I live in the South, so people like this saying, well, I'm preaching to the choir. So my guess is that the people on this call are the choir. So how do we get the people who aren't a part of the choir, a part of this conversation? And that's where we really need to rely on one another. We need to lean on our networks and knowledge. There's some fantastic things happening. Y'all see in the chat, the GT 6000. There are some innovative and creative programs. I've spent the last handful of years touring campuses and talking to professionals who are doing phenomenal things, but we all don't know about it. Right. And so it's sharing our expertise, it's sharing what's working well on our campus, it's sharing data and getting the right people a part of the conversation. That was much longer than one thing. Sorry, Drew.
April, there's a coincidence here about the location of Chicago for this meeting where some of us are going to be, and that is it's the headquarters of our nation's largest of the now national accreditors, the Higher Learning Commission, which accredits 1,000 of our institutes, just a little over 1,000. And I mention this because one of the key strategies of accreditation is to do the dreaded two words, self-study. But one of the things we fervently believe is that until we come together, April, as you just suggested, as an institution and conduct some kind of self-study of the current nature and status and needs of the graduate student experience, we cannot move this forward. And so we want to suggest that as one of a number of actions that could be taken early in this process. You bring people together from different constituencies and you get them talking.
April, I want to pick up on one other thing before I shift to Len to both answer this question, but segue us into the closing for the panel, right? Which is you use the term data. And what brought us initially almost 3 years ago to a conversation around the plight and outcomes and also the approaches that help graduate students thrive was a conversation that we had with colleagues from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, one of whom we've since co-opted, and now he's a senior vice president of the Gardner Institute, Brent Drake, but others, Kate Corrigan, and others involved in the work of graduate student. And the interest there really was they were collecting data on graduate students and analyzing it in a manner consistent with what they do with undergrads to the extent that that was feasible. But there wasn't a national model or a national entity for doing anything around that. So, personally, if I could change one thing, and now I need to go back to being the moderator, I would have a more comprehensive data system in place. I realize that's a heretical notion at a time when the comprehensive system for undergrads may be wobbling a bit. But in the absence of that, a lot of the questions we need to ask, or at least shed some light on, it's just not possible. So, Len, I do want to turn it to you. Like, tell us one thing you change. And by the way, after you do that, role model behavior that the other panelists will emulate with their short one-sentence closing statement before we go to questions. So, Len, floor is yours.
I want to pick up and I want to add to respond to your prompt, and in the form of picking up on something that April just said and what John just said. April talked about the need to get the right people into the conversation, and John talked about self-study. So on the undergraduate level, I think we all know that universities, colleges and universities are very sensitive to what undergraduates and also their parents have to say about the nature of their experience, because undergraduate tuition is the engine that drives most institutions of higher education in the United States. Graduate education is traditionally not a profit center, and it is also traditionally a much smaller, more retail-oriented part of the institution. One of the consequences of this difference is that graduate students are rarely asked what it is that they think about their own experience. This proceeds from the faculty downward. The faculty are absolutely convinced that they know what's best for the students, and that consulting the students is at best a waste of time, and sometimes worse, because they get ideas, about what their educational experience maybe should feel like. This brings me to a third key word, assessment, which for many faculty members is a form of hate speech. But assessment is really something that we do all day long in higher education, where when you think about it, almost all of the work that we do all day is one form of assessment or another. But when we do our own assessment, it's different from answering a mandate from above. And I think if I could change one thing, it would be to raise the consciousness of the need to self-assess and to bring graduate students into that process, because their thoughts, their ideas about their own experience quite often bring new ideas into the conversation that faculty members and other administrators ought to welcome and often do.
Thanks, Len. And Len, is that also your closing comment for the panel portion, or do you want to add one other thing?
You can say so, but I don't want to eat all the oxygen here. So sure, why not?
Okay. All right. Len, thank you. I need an intrepid volunteer to next share their closing comment, and then I'll start picking on people. Right.
I can be your volunteer, sure.
Okay, Jay, it's all you. Yep. Thank you.
Okay, so first, I'd like to just highlight for a second our first year experience, GT 6000. It's a 1 credit hour extended orientation program for new Georgia Tech graduate students led by experienced students. So it's a phenomenal program we have here, and you can contact me if you'd like more information about that. I'm free to share. But in closing, I would like to say that I'm here today because I believe that transforming graduate education requires intentional collaboration across institutions and roles. So faculty, staff, and students all play a part in that. And by engaging in conversations like the one that we're having here, we can collectively reimagine how institutions support graduate learners, not just today, for long-term success and for our academic communities. And Georgia Tech actually attended the Asheville conference in 2024. We actually, under the direction of our Vice Provost for Graduate and Postdoctoral Education, Bonnie Ferry, we sent 7 faculty and staff members who enjoyed the experience so much that we have an annual summit here called the Graduate Education Summit here, where we try to further come up with ideas and share how we can enhance the graduate experience. So thank you, and I'll let whoever wants to volunteer next go ahead.
I think I'll go next. I am the first in my family to earn a bachelor's, master's, and PhD. So I'm here because the University of Michigan opened its doors for me back in 1982 to earn a PhD. And I will forever be grateful for that opportunity. And so my whole life is about increasing opportunities for students who grow up like me with hopes and dreams, but not knowing how to realize them, and especially not having the resources. So I will devote my time to illuminating the whole notion that there is a large cadre of students who want to take advantage of higher education in all its forms, and particularly with graduate education. How do we get these students to be more represented in master's and PhD programs? So I'd like to work on that, and I see this as a movement that can help us to solve that particular issue.
Thanks, Laura. Dan?
My closing statement kind of summarizes everything we've talked about here. I look at graduate education a little differently than what Len said, that it's not a moneymaker. There's a lot of money-making type programs within graduate education, and we need to appreciate that. The graduate enterprise on campus is very large, and we just need to acknowledge it and support it as we do on the undergrad side. And that's my biggest thing. So as I said earlier, WAGs, what about grad students?
Thanks, Dan. April, I'm coming to you, and then John, you'll be our closing statement before we open it up. So April?
I believe that when it comes to very specific initiatives for supporting graduate and professional students, it is so nuanced to your institution. So as a researcher and people having this national conversation, we love national data. But as a practitioner, what is most useful is for us to understand our own students at our own institutions first. If we really want to help drive student success at our home institutions, we have to know our own institutional data. And just like others have said, student voices are a huge contributing factor to that. Then I would say we also have to adapt our practices. Gen Z students, the students in my classroom just this week, are very different than the students in my classroom when I started teaching 18 years ago. And I have to adapt. I have to understand that they have different priorities and different needs. And if I can adapt, then how are we going to best serve them? So we have to learn, we have to lean in, we have to understand our students and understand those nuances. I got to spend some time at Duke University a couple months ago, and what's working well at Duke doesn't always transcend to Western Carolina University. We're regional comprehensive. What's working for medical students doesn't work for a 22-year-old graduate student. And so we really need to look at nuance and our own institutional data here and be willing to adapt our practices.
Thanks, Dr. Perry. Professor Gardner.
Very quickly, I learned a few months ago a new acronym, SCND, which stands for Some College, No Degree. There are 41 million Americans who are SCNDs. And what we're going to do here, if we're not careful, we're going to replicate the mistakes we made in the 1960s when, thanks to the Higher Education Act, we admitted millions of students for whom college was not designed in the first place. And we used that new population as a cash cow. And right now, many institutions are expanding graduate programs in order to offset declines in undergraduate enrollments. And these are basically exploitative. They are not designed with the characteristics of these students in mind. And they will be joining the 41 million Americans who are contributing now to the very negative attitudes towards higher education, which are punishing all of us. So we don't want to be part of that. Okay, Drew, back to you. Let's hear from our audience.
Yeah, thanks, John. And actually, I'm going to go back to Katie Locke, who started us off, who's going to serve as the role of moderator for the Q&A components. Some of our colleagues who have joined us today, the 85 folks who are online with us, I've already posted a few questions, right? And so Katie, you may want to go to those, but we invite you, if you haven't, to go ahead and put them in the chat, and we'll get to them as time permits. Katie, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Drew. So we have quite a few questions, both in the chat and the Q&A, and as well as some that were submitted in advance. So I will try to pick the ones that are the most common and ask them. So the first question is, what are some best practices around engaging online students? Our students are not required to ever come on campus.
I can answer that, Drew. So I think to engage online students, we have a large population of online Masters of Science students, OMS students. And one of the things we do is we recently hired an online career services manager, and this was able to increase engagement among the online population. That role focuses on personalized career support, virtual career events, and networking opportunities. Online peer and alumni mentorship programs, integrated career development in the curriculum, community building through digital platforms, and recognition and celebration of online student achievements. So this person only works with the online master's science students and isn't able to engage them in that manner. Now, this is a new position, so we don't have a lot of data on it, but they started about 6 months ago. So we're hoping that we can see increased engagement. I mean, she's always busy and she's doing an amazing job and her events are well attended, but we saw the need for the online population, and this is one of the ways that we use to directly deal with it.
Can I add something here? It's following from the idea that every institution has its own particularities. That's absolutely true. It ought to be a commandment that you've got to know your own place. But to that, I would add that if you're wondering how to engage students, whether they're on campus or off, it's a good thing to ask them. To ask them what it is that they want. What are they looking for? Not in an open-ended way, because some of them can't always, they know what the problem is, but they can't envision the solution. But try in an instrument that you develop to envision some categories of solutions, perhaps some specifics, so that you can spark the imaginations of the people you're asking, and then pay attention to what they say. It should help.
I feel that some innovations are needed here. I don't think that we've done as good enough a job as we need to do with online students. And so I think some of those innovations are forthcoming. I mean, when I taught online students at UTSA, we did discussion boards and breakout rooms and things that we're totally familiar with. But I think one of the things that we need to consider is that when we want to work with students holistically, we need some ideas about how to incorporate a reflective component that helps students developing a sense of purpose or their future and why they're entering this particular field, how they can give back, and how they can share some of these ideas with others online. So I guess what I'm saying is that I think we have some answers, but we really need to get more answers in the future, because I don't think we've come to a conclusion here that we've solved this completely. I think new innovations are needed.
I would also jump in to say that we should look at whatever we're doing for students, on-campus students, how do we make a virtual component of that or portions of that? Because at Harvard, where we have students spread out all around Boston and a number of students who are doing things outside the Boston area, they want those services and they may not be able to come to campus because it's not that easy to come to some thing at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So can we do some virtual and online components to what we're doing already. And then the online students can just roll into that. And we're not saying, oh, this is for online because you're online, and this is for on ground because you're on ground, but really everything's for everybody.
Thank you. Our next question is, in our retention data, we see students with financial holds and academic challenges disproportionately at risk. What inclusive practices or campus partnerships have you seen that successfully address these barriers? Or maybe partially address these barriers. I know it's all.
I'll pick up on this one, Katie. I don't know the degree to which I just don't work around identification and then intervention around emergency aid efforts for basic needs that are done at the undergraduate level have been translated and transferred to the graduate level. I don't. I'm going to plead ignorance there. But I will say is we do have a good idea on the undergraduate level how that is done and how that is done at scale without breaking the bank and actually intervening when and where it's necessary. As a matter of fact, the Gardner Institute has a community of practice around this, doing this work at the undergrad level. So, I'd recommend consulting the body of scholarship on emergency aid and interventions when and where does a modest amount of either aid or forgiveness lend to successful completion of programs of study. There's no getting back to what April shared, Len shared, others shared. There's no universal model. And even some of the best examples nationally actually only do it with a small subset of the students, right? It's not as massive as some of the literature might lead you to believe. But there are good examples out there in the undergraduate experience. And I'd encourage you to consider those and think about applicability. Particularly, I don't want to dismiss full-time, fully funded PhD students, folks on fellows, that they're important, but particularly, and this gets to what Dan talked about earlier, there are a significant number of master's and or professional programs that exist, yes, to give a good educational experience, but also exist to generate revenue for the institution. And I think there's a moral imperative, particularly in those programs, to make sure that if there is a need for emergency aid in cases and places where you have higher enrollment for revenue generation purposes, you ought to think about how you help there, right? So I'm not telling you you have to, but I am kind of nudging and saying you should and could, right? So food for thought there.
I can tell you at my school in Harvard, which is large and diverse, with a lot of different academic programs, we have a weekly meeting of student affairs, academic affairs, and financial aid folk, and admissions too. And anybody can bring up a student with an issue, and we all work together to see how we can work that out. And it could be through our hardship fund, it could be giving them some leniency in things, helping them out academically so they can have the bandwidth to help solve their problem, whatever it might be. So we try to look at students who are brought to our attention from a holistic viewpoint to help them be successful.
And one of the things I learned talking to my colleagues at the University of Michigan is that even the fully funded doctoral students, their money starts to run out as they are toward the end of completing their program of study. And so, that third or fourth year, that's a particularly challenging time for them. And so I think we need to address that issue as well.
I just want to shout out the people on this call. I see so many colleagues here. And if you all have your ideas, like Maria Erb, you have so many great stuff. I see questions about peer mentoring. I see stuff about inclusive practices. Val, I know you have ideas. Like if there are people on this call and you can put it in the chat, put your links, because I know that there are folks, I'm just reading the chat and I just see so many good questions. And I see so many people in this room who have great initiatives that they are doing at their institution that they could share with you that are really more specific practices and might even answer some of these questions around emergency funding, literacy programs, housing insecurity, childcare, transportation. the list goes on. I've seen so many cool initiatives. So if you're on this call and you're doing one of those cool things, maybe you pop it into the chat.
So Katie, I think we have 3 minutes for 300 stellar questions. So pick the one that really, really, really needs to be answered now, and then tell us what happens next.
Yes, so I'll say first that we will send out the chat after this meeting, so everybody who's registered will receive that. So thank you, April. Sharing your ideas in the chat is a great idea. So this last question could probably be multiple conversations, but we'll see what we can get from our esteemed panel. And it is, I struggle to get senior leadership to invest in graduate education. How have you successfully advocated for additional resources to support graduate students holistically?
I'll chime in really quickly. I struggle with this at my own institution, advocating for my own students and getting people to buy in just to general graduate and professional student success. Data talks. As an administrator right now, as I speak to administrator, if you can demonstrate return on investment, if you can show the data, you're going to get faster and easier buy-in. So I know that that means that we've got to do a lot of homework on the front end, but if you want upper administrators to buy in, I would say start with the data, let that tell your story and lead your story.
Yes, a colleague of mine developed a graduate student experience survey where we get to a lot of the things that are important to graduate students: academic support, advising, sense of belonging, things of that nature. And so we take this data and we use this data to basically inform decisions and programs and a lot of different things. I believe we've done this survey twice. It was a very heavy lift at first for him, but we're going to continue to repeat it. And this is a direct source. The students, all graduate students are able to take the survey. So this gives us concrete data.
I'd like to say quickly that this fundamentally is a discussion about values. What do we value? And the conversation that we are urging you to have with your colleagues on campuses about this, that we're not having now, is about why does this matter? What is the value to your institution, to the students, to our country? And once you can build a case for the value, institutions always find money for what they value. And right now, they're not even thinking about it, many of them. That's where you come in.
So we are down to 1 minute. So does anyone have one last thought, or should we leave on John's sagent advice?
I just want to say WAG. I'm going to be using that a lot.
An excellent. Well, I just want to conclude by saying we do invite you all to join us if you can at the Graduate Student Experience Conference in Chicago. I will include a link to it in the email that follows up. All of these amazing educators will be there, and these will be the types of conversations we're having. So we're excited to have an amazing group of people, nearly 200 people who have registered so far to join us for these types of conversations. And immediately following for your undergraduate colleagues is our symposium on transforming the foundational post-secondary experience. It's very easy for me to say. And we would love to have you or your colleagues join us for that. And mainly, we want to say thank you for giving us an hour on a Friday afternoon, and thank our amazing panelists for really all of your insights. And it was a great conversation, and we will share the information. And whatever you do, yes, keep asking that question, WAG. I think it's a great question. So thank you, everybody, and have a wonderful afternoon.
Bye, WAGs. Can we stay on a minute?
Yes.
Can you
I'm
keep
going
it?
to stop the recording.